I wanted to share about my grandfather and the World War II effects of the war, especially during the Burma Railway that was built. And now I'm just going to go to the next slide.
How can I help you? Can I help you?
Oh,
turn
sure.
it and take-
Perfect. Thank you.
What do I do? I just press which one?
The arrow button.
Arrow. Okay, this one. Okay.
So this was done up during the World War II gallery that was done. I think our dear brother
Children's playground.
who did up the World War II gallery had arranged this, and I think it really categorizes his entire journey from prisoner of war in 15 Feb. Before that, where they were enlisted, and then down in Changi camp, River Valley Road camp. This part is where I'm going to share a little bit more, and this is where last July I went to Kanchanaburi to do sort of like a pilgrimage to find out what was the effect of the war and how bad was it. Because in his book that was written about Camp 4, Kanchanaburi, he shared about how he actually wanted to die many times. I think many of them who did go through it suffered from that. He suffered from malaria, and you can see that he went through many camps: Whampoa, Chungkai, Tuam Wan, Tarawakan, and through those camps they would set up shop, and then very quickly in about 2 weeks or so shift as the railway progresses. So I had a chance. I hooked up with a guy over there, and he took me around, and we spent 2 days going through that. I have to say that having actually stood in those places, you can go to the next slide, really gave me a deeper understanding of the kind of stress and struggles that the soldiers were going through, right? I mean, you got volunteers here who could have run away. You know, there were some of them. In fact, when I interviewed Joe Consensiao before he passed away at the gallery, he shared about how you would see soldiers going around naked, you know, and then hiding in the Hong Kong Shanghai Bank to take all their uniform clothes and run around naked. So the reality is that those who stayed and fought, well, they didn't even fight, right? They surrendered. Believed that the Japanese would adhere to the convention, right? The war convention, and they would be treated accordingly. They were so wrong. And this is just a real background of Cleaver's pursuit to serve in the volunteer corps. All right, so next slide, please. So in the museum, it's very, very well done. Two Australians, both of their fathers were in the war as well. They were both World War II prisoners, and they spent the entire remainder of their life, about 50 odd, when they were 52 years old, they lived, uprooted from Australia, came to Kanchanaburi and set this up. And all this time they've been doing tours, right? And they get people from all over, like New Zealand, UK, and they would go even take helicopters out, because a large section is 415 kilometers, mind you, right? Nearly half of that, in fact more than half, is all covered underwater now. Because don't forget that the bridge, what happened was they dammed the bridge. Right, they dammed the river. They dammed the river, and so a lot of the railway is now underwater. Okay, so this is the railway. You know that they had to take the cars in the cabins that they had to take into Ban Pong, and that was where they ended. The railway ended at Ban Pong, but that is again where the Japanese took over and started to build all the way into Myanmar. So next slide. So this is so to build a railway. Look, the British tried. They tried. They got the engineers. They tried. They couldn't do it. They said it is unsurmountable. There's no way you can bash through the mountain. And you know trains cannot climb. They don't like climbing. So you need to cut through the mountains. The Japanese did it in 16 months, right? And how they did it, this is really interesting, right? They worked the POWs, the Ramushas, right, your Indian workers who were duped into coming to this part. Close to 100,000 of them came, but they were kind of what you shared. They were sort of duped, they were promised everything, free meals and all of that. So next slide, please. So this is just a very quick overview of timeline. this is where he started, October 1942, recollections. A lot of the interviews oral interviews that were done and are in the archives talk a lot about his what was going on. They were really excited when they went to Changi. You know, if you go to the CSC, right, you will see that house. That was where they were interned. Beach front accommodation, right? Wow, you know. And next you know the Changi prison is like, oh, what's going on here? And all these malnutrition guys. And then he says, oh, but at least there's a chapel. Okay, I can go and pray. So he makes very good friends with the priest. I have to say that throughout the period, he held on to his faith. And I think one thing that I learned from my grandfather was never to give up hope. Because if you let anger and frustrations and all that eat you up, you will die. The hope will kill you. The lack of hope will kill you. So in March 1943 became a daily routine. Again, this is where they had marched up into Banpong, and they started building already, right? And so all throughout, so this period is where they were building the bridge. And then the bombing of the bridge took place in November 1944 to about January 1945, thereabouts, right? But it was already very close to the end. Interesting point to note, parts of this bridge were metal. You know where they got the metal from? They stole it. Right? Where did they steal it from? Indonesia, right? The same when you go to Malacca, you'll see a lot of the rock they were built, the forts. They were all taken from Indonesia as well. So it's interesting to know. So I tried to go to Jakarta, my second pilgrimage, to look for this section where they stole the metal bridges. Unfortunately, I couldn't find it. I didn't have enough time. Okay. Interesting other point is that 2nd of September was officially when the Japanese sort of surrendered, right, in Southeast Asia. And in 1952, the 130-kilometer section was restored, and it ends at the waterfall. I'll show you a little bit later. Okay.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
Yeah. So Tanbayazat, if you can pronounce that, is in Myanmar now, right? So the Japanese were interesting, right? They set one team up in Myanmar and the other team up from Banpong, and they connected them, right? So you get two sides, right? And they worked them day and night. So they were very well coordinated. The Japanese engineers, as you can see, most of our cars are now Japanese. They're very meticulous, precise. And again, you have to hand it to them, right? They cut through the mountain, dynamite. So if you visit there, and this is what we were talking about to probably organize a tour for the EA, you will see the Hellfire Pass. And the Australian War Commission has done an amazing job in revamping the whole museum. You'll be blown away. I could spend days just sitting around and just, I plan to retire in Kanchanaburi. Okay, so next slide. Again, we talked about this, right? 90,000 civilian laborers, more than 12,000 were Allied prisoners that died. So I went to visit some of the cemeteries. I have to say it's so well looked after. And I've never ever seen so many graves, right? I went to the one in Jakarta, hardly comparable. And so this is by far in Southeast Asia the largest, well-maintained graves. Again, we talked about the Manusias, right? The Indian, mostly Tamils, right? And it was subject to all of that. So next slide, please.
Sorry, can I ask a question?
Yes.
Are there any Singaporean
Yes.
prisoners from war?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah,
of course.
as long as
I'm sorry, the ones who passed away.
Yes, some of them were buried there, yeah. Many of them are unmarked graves. Many of them are unmarked graves, right? Because you can remember back in that time, 1944, 45. So this is some of the actual exhibits in the museum. It's quite gory, but what I liked was this. Can you see this little inverted water metal glass bottle, which is used as a drip, right? Saline drip for these, and they use thorns as their needles. So it was very graphic, but at the same time very moving to see the kind of things that they had to go through. Why this was very close to my heart was because when my grandfather nearly died from his bout of malaria, he was later on too weak to go back out to build. And therefore he was put in to become a medical orderly, and because he could play the piano, he entertained the Japanese and they liked him around. So he survived because of his hidden side talents, and also he was assisting some of the surgeons. Okay, next slide. So again, another torture where after the after the 1944 bombing, I think the Japanese somehow already knew that they were sort of on the losing end. You had Iwo Jima, and then next, of course, we all know about the Analogy. So these are just taken off what was exhibited there. Next slide. Yeah, it's just these are some of the taunts. So it's a lot of props all over. It's a 2-story with a little cafe. A lot of books and writings about it. So it's really, I mean, that just skims the surface of it. Next slide. Yeah. So they've rebuilt some of these carriages, and this was the Hellfire Pass that I shared earlier. Okay, this is, so you can see this is the actual height of the mountains, right? Of the hills that they had to blast through and carve a way for the trains to get across. And all along you will see flags, and so it's very moving, very moving. In fact, it's very serene, and you could easily spend at least 6 hours there, just walking around and going deeper into it. Yeah, next slide. Yeah, so this is an example, right? This is how deep it goes. And because they were using dynamite and working throughout the night, from the top, if you looked at it, it looked like hell. And then hence they had the name Hellfire Pass. This is fire burning. Yeah, and this is the section where they had the most deaths, right? The most number of deaths. So it was terrible to even think of it, of how they worked the guys through. And all through you actually see drill marks along the rocks and all of that. Yeah. Okay. So this next slide. Yeah. So again, I think ultimately, all said and done, the Japanese did allow them to keep some of their prayer books, you know. So they did have a little bit of a humanity aspect, in even burying the dead. So it's interesting, right? That the Japanese, on one hand, were very task orientated. You try to be a slacker, you're finished, right? You have mud in your face, you use your teeth. My grandfather lost a lot of his teeth, at least 6 or 7 of his teeth, you know. But that kind of fierce determination to get the project done. But when it came to death, yeah, so it's interesting. We had some of these funeral wakes, and so some of them would try and use this to get away from work as well. So it's interesting. Yeah. Okay.
It must have been Eurasian.
Yeah. So I think so again, like you can see, you know, cut firewood, repair damaged railway. And interesting point to note, if you all have watched the movie Bridge over River Kwai, right, you will see that part of the bombings, to distract the air bombers from actually bombing, the Japanese made them line up again along the railway in hope that the Allied forces would see the POWs and not bomb. So yeah, so there's this scene of them actually jumping into the river and all. So that was actually a difficult part to stomach. Yeah. So next slide. Yeah. So this is a train that you can actually take from Ban Pong. So if you fly into Bangkok, this little slow train, which takes about 6 hours, will get you there in all of 12 Singapore dollars. So it's really cheap. And I took the faster route. I took Uber, and I arrived at the airport at 10 p.m. I took Uber. I arrived in Kanchanaburi at 12:30 a.m. Checked into a RAF hotel and slept like a baby. I chose that option because I didn't have 6 hours to spend. I only did it over a weekend.
So how long was the Grab ride?
2.5 hours.
2.5 hours.
Yeah, it was a nice little lady, and it cost me all of less than 30 Sing dollars. So
So cheap.
30. Sorry, US. Yeah. Okay. So you can. This is a picture taken by me. But if you go on the web and you look at Kanchanaburi, you see many of these photos. In fact, this is made into a fridge magnet.
Instagram.
So yeah.
Instagram.
Yeah, and I think ultimately a lot of the passion that my grandfather went on to serve as a usher, as a warden in Queen of Peace, and then later as a head discipline master in SGI. Everybody remembered it. Even Teo Chi Han, when I met him the other day, he's like, "Oh, I know your grandfather." It's like, "Yeah." He's like, "Oh, I was prefect." I said, "Okay." So he said, "Every time you shout, I want to." It's like, okay, fine. Yeah. So it's boisterous voice and loud and firm. And I think he got some of that from mimicking the Japanese. I don't know. Yeah. So I think this is the last slide. Or next, is there one more? Yeah. Okay. So this is the Chungai War Cemetery. So it's actually very well maintained, like I mentioned earlier. And you can see that there were over 300 Dutch casualties, 1,004 Commonwealth. And it's interesting because it was a Dutch POWs family who donated money to set up a Catholic church. So there's one Catholic church right next to the cemetery, which I attended mass in. It's only like one mass on that Sunday. So if you miss it, you're finished. You've got to go for confession. No, in Thai. Yeah. But the Lord will be forgiving in Thai. Okay, so next, I think this is the last one.
Yeah, that's it.
Then you okay. So this is the place. This is how it looks like. It's called the Death Railway Museum and Research Center. There's another one that is really the Death Railway. They call it the Death Railway Museum, which isn't very much to cry and crow about. Yeah. But this is the one that we want to spend a lot of time in. So thank you very much. Any questions?
Thank you, Christian, for sharing your trip with us.